Good morning. When John asked me to talk, he said I had to wear a blue vest as well, so I'm following suit. These guys didn't get the memo. When we go to Honduras and we work with the Garifuna, we greet them and we say, Biti Bunafi. So go ahead. That's good morning. So the response to that is, I have no idea. That's the only word I know from there, and it's a great time. So if you don't know me, I'm Brandon Larson. I'm a complete introvert, if you don't know me. So John has asked a few of the team to come up and help keep me accountable to the time frame, because we tend to go long on this. So, but I wanted to speak a little bit about Honduras. So I want to talk a little bit about why we go every year. I've gone 25 years now, and the stories kind of all blend together. But one of the reasons I go, and it would be easier not to go, it'd be easier to stay comfortable. Going and planning for it is uncomfortable. Going down can be uncomfortable. And it's an easier way to stay here. But the scripture tells us we can't do that. 1 John 3:18 says, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. And Jesus says in John 15:13, love one another as I have loved you. Then he defines it. Greater love has no one than this, that someone should lay down their life for his friends. That level of sacrifice seems extreme. You don't need to sacrifice your life to come to Honduras. But what he is saying is that it does require some inconvenience, and it does require putting yourself out there a little bit and getting outside of your comfort zone. And really that's what this trip is about. It isn't necessarily to go to Honduras. It isn't necessarily to make ourselves better. That becomes a byproduct of serving. But the love of God in us and the love that we want to express to those down there, if you listen to the promptings, it's an opportunity to serve and ultimately be served back. It's about putting faith in action. Philippians, we're studying in our small group, we're studying Philippians. And so Philippians 2:12 and 13 tell us, work out your own salvation, for it is God who works in you both to will and to work for his good pleasure. God is already at work in you. Our actions are how we participate in what he's doing. And we talked a little bit about that in our small group, that our actions and our works are a byproduct of the love that we have for Christ. And hopefully that reflects on those that we see in Honduras. When we go to Honduras, we serve, we build, and we encourage. But something deeper happens. We step outside of ourselves, our comfort, our routines, and our preferences, and we discover something truly unexpected. we discover that God's already there. We didn't have to go and bring him to them. He's there. And he's in unique fascinating ways that we never anticipated. And that is, we tend to see, he tends to change us. We see faith in the people that just humbles us. We see faith that they shouldn't have because of the circumstances they're in, but they have more than we do. We see love that is real, sacrificial, and alive. And we don't just serve together, we're formed together. I'll tell a quick story. So, like I said, 25 years of serving down there. A lot of the stories, a lot of things we do blend together. I forget what I had for breakfast today. So it's hard for things to stand out. But one that does stand out to me is a few years ago now, I was painting at a pastor at his church, and it was just me. The team had gone elsewhere, and I was finishing up, and he was so grateful for just painting, that he was expressing love in a way I'd never seen. He came up to me, and he grabbed my hands, and he had this bowl of hot water and soap, and he put my hands in the soap. Now, that's really awkward for an American man, right? He grabbed my hands, and he's dipping them in there, and I'm like, what are you doing? And then he started to scrub my hands, and he started to wash my hands like Jesus washed feet. He was washing my hands. I'm like, I can wash my hands. I'm good. But as I calmed down and let that happen, I really felt the love expressed by him. That's all he could give, and that's all he did. And he washed my hands, and that still sticks out to me today. This guy grabbing my hands and washing them in this warm water. Why would you do that? And I took that back with me, and I tried it on the Comcast guy that came over, and that didn't work well. So context is everything, I guess. But the other is because we serve side by side, and we see God move together. Our group is united in incredible ways. Whether we're there every year or every other year, the group is unified in one purpose and love. I think of one more story. Roger Reek. Let's see if he comes up here. Roger Reek is now gone a year. He's the gentleman in the white hair and mustache. Spoke 12 languages. A man of incredible love. One of those guys you got to have in your life just once. But he was significant. He was a Pied Piper. Everywhere he went, people followed him around, and they would show up, and he would play. He would play with the kids, and you thought he was the most unserious person in the world. But he had this deep love for Christ, and he used to say to us, it doesn't take a lot to serve and to love these people. Just show up. Just show up. And you just showing up has made all the difference to these people. He will tell us at the end of every trip, he'll say, just being here, these people for the next year will tell stories about those big Americans that broke bread with them, that came into their houses, that showed up and stood alongside of them and did work and laughed together, even though we didn't know what we were saying to each other. He said that is what resonates, and that's how you carry love all the way through. So you'd say, thank you for coming down, and just showing up mattered. And it didn't matter what your skill set was, and it didn't matter if you lift one brick or none. It was being alongside of them and showing God's love. And that's the challenge, not just going somewhere far away. It doesn't take going to Honduras with us. It just takes stepping out and trying something. And there's opportunities at Woodcrest and other places just to step outside your comfort zone a little bit and just show up. And there's opportunities to show your love and for God to respond. Now Now, I've got some others up here that are going to share a little bit about their trip. We've asked some questions of them because we didn't want to go off rails. We wanted to make sure we get some questions. And first one is, what did the people of Honduras teach you about love in action? And is there an encounter that changed the way you see faith lived out?
I'll start here. Earlier this week, Kiri, my wife, she read me the Woodcrest e-news, and it said, this was the title of the sermon, "Love that brings life change. Together we'll discuss how genuine Christ-centered love goes beyond words and transform both lives and others and our own." She looked at me and she goes, "I thought you guys were speaking next week." And I said, "We are." And she goes, "Oh." But I usually don't do this, but I ended up writing most of mine down because if you can't tell by Brandon's words, this can be hard, but it's emotional for all of us. And it's every single year, there's a couple things that I say that every time we go, you're going to laugh more than you'll ever laugh. You're going to cry more than you cry, and God's going to show up. And he does every single year. And I wrote this down in part because to try to get through it, because as I get older, I swear, like, you just get more and more emotional. I don't know if anyone else is that way, but so this was my 7th trip to Honduras, and even knowing how meaningful these trips always are, I didn't step into this one easily or with the same excited anticipation. Even up to the night before we left, I was struggling and had doubts about going. The trip was happening regardless, but I felt uneasy. Work stress was heavy, and I was dealing with some health concerns that left me feeling uneasy. I didn't feel energized or prepared. I felt worn down. But I was going, trusting that obedience doesn't require certainty, only willingness. And as always, God had something to show me. What the people of Honduras continued to teach me over and over is that love isn't something you claim, it's something you live. It shows up in action, sacrifice, and faithfulness. This trip was especially meaningful because my brother-in-law came with me. He was born and raised in El Salvador until his teenage years. And during this trip, he shared his story with our group. His parents made significant sacrifices so he could attend a bilingual school. That decision didn't just shape his education, it changed the trajectory of his life. When his family eventually came to the U.S., that foundation opened doors. But more importantly, his love for Jesus now shapes everything he does. Shortly after he shared his story, we became aware of a local pastor's need. Out of their 4 children, they were only able to afford bilingual school for their 2 youngest. And within the last 6 months, they had to pull their youngest daughter out because they couldn't afford to continue to send her to school. Upon hearing of this, the group stepped up. We committed to covering her education. She's in 1st grade now, so she'll go through 12th grade. We all committed to covering her education for her to go through bilingual school. In that moment, 1 John 3:18 came alive. Let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. Another moment that still deeply impacts me happened on a previous trip. Our group had built a home for a pastor and his family. And this was a village that, talk about out in the middle of nowhere. We crossed rivers and streams. I don't know how we got there, but we did. But we went back the following year to do some work on his church as well. And I can still remember when a pastor grabs you both of your arms, and he looks you in the eyes and says, "Every day I thank God for the gift that you all helped give me." I don't know about you, that doesn't happen every single day. Moments like that impact you. He wasn't just talking about a house, but dignity, stability, and the ability to serve his church faithfully. And then there was a young woman our group helped put through college. One day she asked us, "Why do you care about us? You don't even know us." The answer was simple: because Jesus commands us to. Jesus says in John 15, love one another as I have loved you. The love is personal, it's sacrificial, and it doesn't stop when it's inconvenient. The people of Honduras don't just thank us, they teach us. They remind us that faith isn't proven by what we say, but by who we show up for.
So I was asked to remember someone from Honduras that displays love in action. And the first young lady that came to my mind was someone named Danielle. She's kind of had a tough upbringing. I mean, she's been raised in an orphanage. She has some very severe physical limitations. I don't know the technical details, but she essentially is unable to go out into sunlight. She will grow cancer very quickly. As a result, she's lost both of her eyes and numerous skin conditions and has really very, very poor health. And yet, through that, she is still the most joyful person that I probably have met. Just always has a very quick smile. She definitely has just the love of all of the other siblings that she's been raised with, and you can really just see that lived out day by day. Anytime she's around, she is really just joyful and brings all of the kids together. Since she can't go out in the sunlight, her exercise and some of the things that she does will be like going out for a walk at night, once the sun's gone down. And so, the other kids will always gather around and take her on long walks once the sun has gone down. And so it's just something that she really brings them all together in that way. We've been going down and interacting with the orphanage by bringing some donated shoes and giving them out to the kids. And so it's just a good touch point to be able to go down and be with the kids. And so we will always just like play games and interact with the kids. And Danielle always just sets the tone. And she really just exudes joy. When you give her shoes, she's always, jumping up and down, clapping, and that sort of thing. So it just always makes me look at her and say, she has all these limitations, and we just don't. And so we don't really have an excuse not to show the love of Christ.
All right, thank you. So as we were getting to the end of our trip, I heard that the last day of work was going to be hauling cement, which is probably the hardest work that we do. So I was looking for a way out, and as some of you may know, I'm a doctor, so there's a hospital that's nearby that we work very closely with. So I thought maybe that'd be a good day, go check out the hospital and see how things are going over there. So I left these guys, they went to the work site. I tried to find some clean clothes in my bag at that time of the trip and went over to the hospital. And I'm really glad that I did because it was very impactful. It's a small Christian hospital. You can see the sign here, Hospital Loma de Luz. And when I got there, it was a Friday morning. It was very busy. The surgery board was full. The waiting room was full. And I thought, I hope I'm not a big disruption to these people because it looks like they have a really busy day. Here's a picture I took of the waiting room. You can tell it's mine because I got my finger covering the bottom part of the picture. I don't know why they make phones like that. But essentially the way they work things there is that everybody comes in a big cluster at 8 a.m. and they wait in this waiting room. They don't know exactly when their appointment will be. And I thought, okay, it's going to be a long day. The waiting room was crowded. This is a picture I took later in the day. But instead of getting them right in for their visits, the doctors come out with their guitars and start playing worship music. So they go through 3 or 4 songs. All the people are waiting there. Now, I should say if you have a real emergency, like your appendix is bursting or you're actively having a baby, there is a different place you can go. You don't have to wait for the worship set to be done. That would be distracting. So in my American way of thinking of things, I'm getting a little bit sweaty, like all these people are waiting and we're singing songs. After the songs were done, the doctors go back to the doctor's room and have a devotional, sharing prayer requests, going through Bible verses. And here's the group of doctors that I worked with, just a bunch of very special people. So eventually the devotions are done, it's 9 o'clock, and then they start to go and do their work. And what they told me is that the patients feel a very close connection with them because they've done the worship music. They will often pray with their patients, and they have a tight connection with them. Many of the patients will travel past many of the public hospitals to come to this one to be able to receive that kind of care. And for me, that was very impactful because in my work, it's a lot about how many patients you can see, working through lunch, taking on extra duties, and to see these people really putting the focus on the spiritual side as well as the physical side, I think was a great reminder. And it reminded me of Jesus and his ministry too. You know, everybody wanted to be healed, and often Jesus was turning them more interested in the spiritual part of their lives, like Mark chapter 2, when the paralytic is dropped into where Jesus was speaking. You know, he obviously wanted to be healed, but Jesus' first comment is, your sins are forgiven. I think that's a good reminder that the spiritual is more important than the physical. And I think for me, I was really able to learn that from this hospital. I was very blessed to be able to spend a day with them.
Thanks, Greg. And it was only because you couldn't find a golf course that you went to.
Sure.
Just kidding, but
They're always
please join
joking.
us. We'll have fun. So Dwayne came back this year. He wasn't able to do it the year before, but the year before that, he was my right-hand guy when we lost all of our bags on a trip, 30, 40 plus bags missing, and he helped get through that. So same question, what did the people in Honduras teach you about love in action? And is there an encounter that changed the way you see faith lived out?
I would say, actually, there are probably two encounters that come to mind as that I just saw an underlying joy with the people down there. And one would be when you go to a church service down there, it's a different experience. In spite of their circumstances that they live in down there and how different it is from here, you just see the joy in their hearts when you hear them sing and you listen to their messages. And another thing that I saw too, with where there was an example of of joy, was when we would go to the work sites. And there was one site that we were at where there were some younger guys helping out that were locals, and they were just having a ball. And it was just inspiring to just see them just having fun. They're moving concrete, they're digging sand, they're doing whatever would needed to be done. We were helping out, of course, but they were just moving the whole day with smiles on their faces, and it was really just quite enjoyable to just see that, and it's the reassurance of God's presence when we see that down there.
That's a great one. We're going to go the other way now down the line. Greg, what did stepping out of your comfort zone and serving others challenge you to live out your faith in a tangible way?
Well, I had a lot of worries going on this trip of all the things that could go wrong. You know, what if I get sick while I'm down there? What if I don't like the food? What if I don't sleep well? What if my roommates don't like me? What if I don't like my roommates? What if they don't have Dr. Pepper available, which I've been addicted to for several decades? And in addition, like, the main part of the work we do is construction work, and I'm not very gifted in that area. You really don't want me building your house or having any significant role in that. So what would be the point of me going? So despite that, I did feel called to go, and I'm glad that I did, because God still had some work for me to do, even though this might not have been what I was really good at. What I noticed in our group, which was amazing to see how God has gifted people so differently. So certain people in the group, like a few of these guys here, they can see a bunch of building materials on the ground and see just how it fits together, and it's going to make a beautiful roof, and they can do those things and get the roof looking amazing. And then some people are not as gifted in that area. And then we do other things. For example, we went to the orphanage and we did a feeding program for kids. And then there's different guys who have kids hanging on their arms and they're telling jokes, and they got 10 kids that are around them because they're just very gifted and approachable, and the kids love them. Here's a picture of Brandon with a bunch of kids, and you see people gifted in that way. There's other people who are very gifted in being wise and choosing, what projects we should do. There's so many needs. What do we actually focus on? And so I was thankful for those people. For example, one of the projects we did was a pastor who had been very loyal to his church, but had a house that kept flooding. And so they were able to choose that as a project, raise the foundation, put a roof on. He was there every day watching while we were doing it. I just imagined his joy to see that, that new house that was going to be for him. So in the end, there was a lot of different things to do besides just the construction work. I think the main things for me that I really enjoyed, I already alluded to spending a day in the hospital. I got to meet with all those doctors and kind of hear their journeys and share, what my journey has been as well. I think that hanging out with the kids was really fun for me too. I know just a little bit of Spanish, so I was able to communicate and get to know some of the people a little bit. So even though the trip didn't seem like it was totally in my wheelhouse, I'm glad that God challenged me to go, and I got to just have some great moments there and see all the giftedness of our group as well.
Yeah, I can really appreciate this group because our gifting is really so different and varied, and it really meshes well as a team. My gifts really align a lot more on the physical, designing, building. The construction stuff was what really drew me to the annual trip every year. And so, it's something where I built my profession around being an engineer, where I get to, design and build and kind of do the physical, tangible building and that side. For me, I get in and I really engage on that side. With my profession, I don't know if you know other engineers, but they tend to not necessarily be as outgoing and really their comfort zones are really not that intentional, generating relationships and really intentionally going out and meeting people. My favorite joke for an engineer would be, how do you know who is an outgoing engineer? They're the one that will speak to your shoes instead of their own during a conversation. So it's something that I've had to really use these trips to be intentional about getting out in the community, and really you feel the love of people that just come in and accept you and want to engage with you. So there was one particular boy I think that I have been interacting with in a church for the last 4 years. I've selfie pictures and stuff with he and I. We're just kind of hanging out, and so you start to get to know some of these people that maybe you just have a little bit of a touch connection with every year. And so it was really sad for me this year. I went into this church expecting to see him, and he wasn't there. And so it's one of those, you realize that those relationships you build, as fleeting as they are in small doses every year, they're still very meaningful. And so it's just challenging for me when I come back home to remember that being intentional about getting to know people and sharing the love of Christ on a personal level, even though it's not in my wheelhouse and comfort zone, it's important.
So while Greg's searching for Dr. Pepper and worried about the availability of Dr. Pepper, he did find some. Others of us are worried about Pepto-Bismol and proximity to bathrooms more often than he's worried about Dr. Pepper. But what challenged me most on this trip, like I said earlier, was realizing that I didn't arrive feeling strong. I arrived feeling reluctant. I stepped onto the plane stressed, tired, and unsure if I had anything left to give. And that was exactly where God met me. Honduras has a way of stripping life down to its essentials: shelter, food, people, and faith. There's no excess, no pretending. And in that simplicity, it becomes painfully clear how often we rely on comfort instead of trust. Serving there isn't comfortable. You're tired, you're hungry, you long for normalcy. But it also reveals how little we actually need to serve. What's required isn't strength or abundance, it's willingness. A willingness to be vulnerable, to act, and to see people the way God sees them. Paul writes in Philippians 2:12-13, "Work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you." that verse became real to me. God didn't ask me to feel ready. He asked me to be willing. What struck me the most was the faith of the people we serve. Pastors leading faithfully with very little. Families trusting God daily because there is no backup plan. Churches measuring success not by size, style, or resources, but by obedience. It forced me to rethink what we often chase back home, back here. Success, money, appearances, how impressive our churches look, or how well we perform spiritually. Honduras reminds me every time that faith without works is dead. Not because work saves us, but because living faith moves us to act. I love going to Honduras not because of what I give, but because of what it gives back to me. It clarifies what truly matters, not stuff, not success, not comfort. It's about people, relationships. An incredible gracious and generous God who provides exactly what we need, often through one another. I went reluctantly, but I came home reminded of what it truly means to follow Jesus. I'm always hesitant to read things because I tend to, revert back to college when the professor would read slides, so I was reluctant to read, but, it came upon me that I think the words that we say and how we say it, I hope it invokes an emotional response from all of you. I think God, when we serve and we step out in faith to serve other people who need it, it costs us something. It maybe costs us comfort, and maybe it costs us just time, money, all those different things. I mean, if you look around just in this church, whether it be ushering, whether it be being a greeter, whether it be putting coffee out or security or safety team. Thanks, Brent. But there's lots of things that we can do. You don't have to go to Honduras to serve, to help other people. And I'll kind of end with this because this is kind of, God has a crazy way of putting things together, but it kind of comes back to my brother-in-law. So he grew up in El Salvador, moves to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Through a long story, somehow marries my sister, and we're from North Dakota. And then I end up in this church. I get invited to go on this trip probably like 8 years ago. I fall in love with going down to Honduras. My brother-in-law's first language is Spanish. And he came with us and he lives in Kenai, Alaska. So he had a little bit longer flights than we did. But so he comes down there. And I didn't know all of his story. Shame on me, but he shared this story with us, and the day before we kind of come to realize what this pastor was asking for his daughter. And I think about the craziness for that all to work together, to hear that story that my brother-in-law shared the day before we heard of this need of this pastor's daughter. I mean, that's just crazy. The way that God works and puts people in certain situations. And we could have ignored it. We could have chose to great story, let's and move on. But I think the willingness and the openness to hear things and be moved and let God work in you and move in you is what we're called to do. It's not easy because in doing that you also give up control, which we love control. So, but God has a plan. I just ask, and if you ever want to come on this, I tell you, you'll grow deeper if you're longing for relationships that at a deeper level. There's a lot of things these guys that I know and trust and love them, that you can call on them if you're one of those individuals that do not have relationships like that, and I'd be willing to guess that's a lot of us in here. I'd encourage you to do something like this. It will change you.
I would say, stepping out of our comfort zone down there, one thing that's striking is just their circumstances compared to how we live, and just trying to understand how, how they manage to live life day to day, but with God and Jesus in their lives, that carries them through, but at the same time, it's so different than here that it kind of sets you back a little bit to think about how they do it versus how we do it, and how overcomplicated our lives are versus how they live down there. And but at the same time, we had with a great group to work together down there, and it helps take some of that discomfort, if you will, for lack of a better word, out of it, and we really grow to great fellowship down there and all the work that we do, and the morning devotionals that we do, those help develop the fellowship that we have down there too. And it's there's perhaps, we're stepping out of comfort zones, but at the same time, we're growing together down there. That helps, I think, overcome some of that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so nothing like five big guys to come up and cry about love and going on a missions trip and so on. But I couldn't reinforce everything that they've said more, is that it takes no talent to come. It takes nothing but showing up. If Roger was here, he would just tell you to show up. To show up and let God work how God's going to work. And we'll find something to do. We'll find another project. I say to people all the time, you throw a stone and see a problem. There's lots of problems and lots of needs. And as we go forward, we're going to start to look at things like women's ministries down there and some other feeding programs and some other opportunities that have come out of tragedy. So we're going to continue to pivot and continue to listen to God as we continue to grow this ministry. So thank you for the support, and then also thank you for your time this morning. John, would you close us?
Thank you, everyone, so much. I want to invite the worship team to come on up. Did you hear the message for you? First John 3. Dear children, let's not merely say that we love each other. Let us show the truth of loving each other, the truth of Jesus' love in us by our actions. So here's my challenge for you from what you've heard. Of course, if God puts it upon your heart, I know Brandon and team would welcome many of you next year, but I hope you heard a deeper message than that. How many of you, if you've trusted in Jesus, know that Jesus is in you? Just put up your hand. Okay. Here's my challenge for you. Just show up. Show up in your marriage. Show up with your kids. Show up at work. Show up with your neighbors. Show up with one another. I think that's what Roger, right? Roger would want us to know. Would you stand? Let me pray for all of us around that. And then as a closing song, we're going to sing this song again. And it's my prayer that you would make it your prayer. Jesus, I would pray that beyond just a mission story today, these are real people giving of themselves because of your work in them. And God, I pray that would be an inspiration to us. You say in your word, let us join together and encourage one another and spur each other toward love and good deeds. Jesus, we've been spurred on today. And so I would pray, Jesus, in every situation here, in every life here, I pray that by your grace, you would help us to show up and choose the Jesus way.